class, this is an overview of our final research project write-up. So you are going to go into the course and you are going to see the research write-up module. You'll see that there are some pages for you to review and some links. So I'm going to be going over those. So the first one gives you a general project overview of the goals. So research involves writing up what is going on, what did you find, and applying what we've learned in class to some real world situations. So that's the focus of our project. You are given some tools to help you. So the first link, which is the sample report, gives you a general write-up. And this is the general write-up. This was taken from a student who had worked with me to do a research project. And this goes through and shows the kind of write-up that she had done. Again, yours isn't going to be perfectly mapping to this, but it gives you a general idea. You will also see that we have a Google folder. And so this Google folder is linked here. When you open it, you will see this, which contains two files that are going to be important for you. It is this output file and the survey file, and I'm going to go over those in just a minute. And then you have a Google form. The Google form is going to be very handy when you click on this link here, take you to this guy. This Google form, again, going back to your write-up, is number 3. It's sharing with you everything you need to do for this write-up. So these are going through and scaffolding you what information you need to share with me. This is going to be about a 2-page write-up, might be a little bit more. And you're going to be answering these questions. When you answer these questions, again, you are going to not number them. You are going to write it up in more of a flowing way. So you might have a paragraph that goes over your research question you picked based on our study, which I'm going to go over, and answering some operational definition problems, and then answering your what focus independent group you're going to focus on for our t-test analysis. You then might have another small paragraph that goes over data collection and your expected hypotheses. So you're going to have hypothesis for your t-tests, and then a hypothesis for your correlation, and then you're going to give me a little bit of writing up the results, and then you're going to give me some interpretation of that. And we are going to be following APA. For the measures that you're being used, that we're using, these give you some general references for the measures that were used. So if you remember, you had taken part in a research study. It was a Google survey form. It was distributed to all students in Introduction to Statistics with Dr. Bear. And it was also shared out with your students in your class. You shared it out with 2 other Chandler Gilbert students. So the survey asked, the first scale is actually the well-being scale. It asked you to respond from not at all to all the time, and it gave you 5 different statements. This is from the World Health Organization well-being. It's a 5-item measured scale. You get a score from here, and the higher the score, the greater well-being you're showing. The next measure is a perceived stress scale. And so this, again, was a Likert type item from never to very often, and there were 4 questions here. Of these 4 questions, 2 were actually reverse coded. So you see that higher scores would give you a greater perceived stress and less control of the situation. You then are asked 1-item question on sleep quality, and actually there has been a research study that validated you can use 1 item for sleep quality. So I give you the link of the references for that. And actually, since I clicked on this one, this is that perceived stress scale, which is used a lot with nursing and other health fields. Sorry, going through my, and then you were asked how much sleep you got on an average of the past 2 weeks. And then you were asked some demographic questions. So as a participant in this survey, you'd ask, are you taking a psychology class? Are you a full-time, part-time student? Are the majority of your classes asynchronous or hybrid? Your employment status, biological sex, and student classification as traditional or non-traditional. All right, so this was the survey measure. From the survey measure, you're seeing you have items on well-being, perceived stress, sleep, and measured in 2 different ways, sleep quality and then actual sleep. So we're looking and focused on those 4 different topics. And then we're interested in possible differences between our different demographic measures. So you get to choose, and I'm going to go over the output, but you get to choose which of these different demographic outcomes you want to focus on, except employment status. Employment status is beyond t-test because it's more than 2 groups. Okay, so that's the survey. And again, you can always review and look at it from your project link folder. And then we're going to also have the output. And then again, you have identified measures and some references for APA and write-ups. And again, you're given some guidance on the things that you should be writing about. Again, the whole premise of this is for you to kind of explore and apply what you've learned in this class to our project. And so the other piece of this, before I go over the results, is the peer review form. So I would like you to go ahead and write up a draft of your write-up to the best of your abilities. And then you are going to ask a peer from class to review your paper and fill this out. And again, you can have them print it off and write on it. You can make a copy of it and type on it. You are going to turn that, whatever that was, into a PDF and submit it when you submit your paper. And so this gives some guidelines on what you should respond to them with to help them along in the project. So if you are working with someone in writing this up and you're both working together on the same document, I would ask that you ask someone else to review it. If you do work with someone in the write-up of this document, you and that person both need to add a comment when you submit your final paper saying, Matt and I worked on this together. And so then when I see 2 highly similar, identical result write-ups for this project, I'm going to know that you had worked together on this, and I would expect that it was a mutual thing. Your other option is to work independently and then exchange drafts. And so if you're not working independently on your research project on this write-up, you need to identify someone else to do the peer review. Okay, so let's go through. So if you go back to this module, so you will see back in the modules, you've got your, again, links. This is going to take you to that required Google page that goes through it. This is where you're going to submit the project, and this is the folder that has the data and information. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about this data. So we're interested in looking at group differences and relationships. So when we identify descriptives, I could report the total number of people who participated in the study. All right, so we've got 40 people. Of the 40, 30% or 12 said the majority of their classes are asynchronous. 70% or 28 said the majority of their classes were hybrid. We had 3 different groupings from our employment categories. All right, 7 people, or 17.5%, said they weren't employed. 18, or 45%, said they were employed full-time. And 15, or 37.5%, said they were employed part-time. From our respondents, we also had 30 individuals identify as biological female, which is 75% of our sample, and 10 or 25 identify as biologically male. Going through and looking at our distribution of traditional or non-traditional student status, we had 23 or 57.5% say they were traditional, and 17 or 42.5% say they were non-traditional. So now that we've gone through the descriptives, you're going to see the last bit of this output is independent t-tests. For each independent t-test, you are going to need to first scroll down to where you see the descriptives, and then that will tell you, and it's going to be after the assumptions, which t-test it was. So the first t-test that is showing is comparing traditional versus non-traditional students. So this goes through and shares the mean, the median, and the standard deviation and the standard error for each one of these groupings for well-being, perceived anxiety, perceived stress scale, and average sleep, and then sleep quality. Then we're going to go back here and we're going to make sure we've met our assumptions. In 230, you take assumptions for granted, and real life, you check them. And so here on these columns, we do not want them significant, and they aren't, though we do have one that's getting there. It actually is there for perceived anxiety. We've got some issues with variance differences between traditional and non-traditional students. All right, so that's one thing to take note of. But when we look at our actual t-tests, so again, this first t-test is traditional versus non-traditional students. This is the actual reported t. This is the degrees of freedom. And again, we had 40 students, so 40 minus your 2 groups is 38. This is the exact p-value. Your p column you want less than 0.05. If you were to calculate the t, you would go mean difference over standard error. Boom, that's your t. Then they're giving you the confidence interval spread. And then they're giving you Cohen's d, which is effect size. I do, with your write-up, want you to report effect size, because effect size can identify probable errors. If I had a non-significant t, but then I had an effect, that could give me a possible error. So I'd like you to mention that, consider that. All right, so it looks like when we compare traditional and non-traditional students, there are no differences in well-being. There are no differences in perceived anxiety or perceived stress. There are no differences in sleep quality or sleep amount. Okay, so that was our first t-test run. You're going to see there's several t-tests run. Here is our second. Again, to identify what one is going on there, I'm going to look at, so here it is asynchronous versus online that we're comparing. And so again, you would find that in the descriptives. Again, this would give you the t. This would give you degrees of freedom. This would give you your p-values. Again, p less than 0.05 is significant. And this is your Cohen's d. All right. You're then going to see I went ahead and ran Anovas for employment status, because employment status had more than 2 categories. Now, this is not part of your write-up, but I am kind of showing you because we did have some significant effects here. So here, this is looking at well-being. We do see differences in well-being based on employment status. So that P of 0.07 or P of 0.027 is less than 0.05. And then this is our eta squared, which is effect size. In this case, we did not have any issues with our assumption checks. And then this gives us our post hoc to tell us which ones are different than the others. And it looks like the driving case is employed part-time and full-time have differences in well-being. So then same thing for the ANOVA, but now we're running it for perceived stress. There are no differences in perceived stress amongst our 3 employment statuses. And then sleep quality, there is differences in sleep quality based on employment status. Again, a significant F, P less than 0.05. Here's our eta squared. We did meet our assumption checks, and this tells you there are differences. So where are the differences happening? Again, employed full-time, part-time, you see differences between employment status or sleep quality based on employment status. For sleep hours, there is no differences. So there are differences in sleep quality for full-time versus part-time, but there are differences in actual hours of sleep reported. This t-test here is t-test for gender differences. So gender differences, here are our t's, here are our p's. Again, significance is less than 0.05, and here are our Cohen's t's. When you're looking at gender, we did meet our assumptions. And again, you can go through and look at the descriptives for males and females being reported. So your PDF is going to give you all those results. The other results that I have yet to review, and I'll review quickly, but you're going to have assignment connected to this, is the correlations. So the correlations, it is a matrix. It looks at what is the relationship between the variable that's in the column and the variable that's in the row. When you see stars, it indicates there are significance. So there's this little note here. So we are seeing a significant relationship between people's reports of well-being and their perceived anxiety. All right. We are also seeing reports of significance between your reports of well-being and your sleep quality. All right. So the better your sleep quality, the higher your well-being, your higher sleep quality. Your perceived anxiety, perceived stress, the higher perceived stress that you have, that's identification of like control of your stress, what you can and can't control, your capability of figuring things out when you're stressed, is connected to higher well-being ratings. We also see significance between sleep quality and perceived anxiety or stress. So the more I can perceive I'm in control of things and I'm capable of things to do, I'm handling stress, the better sleep quality I've rated. You also see that perceived anxiety or perceived stress connect with hours of sleep, more perceived control, more perceived ability, higher sleep, more sleep hours, and then sleep quality is related to hours of sleep. So you rated your sleep quality as higher, you also reporting more hours of sleep. And so you're going to have assignment connected with this, and in the output I'll show you that correlation matrices for these so you can kind of see what's going on with those. The other thing that I'm asking you to do for your write-up is to graph it. And so I would love for you to graph what is going on with that t-test data. All right, so I hope this is a tool for you. And again, feel free to connect with classmates, and I'm excited to read your research papers.